Hey there, ninjas. So there's been a lot of questions about fish lately in the group, and so I'm making fish for dinner, and I wanted to demo for you guys how to make fish in parchment. It's actually super easy, and since I'm doing it anyway, I thought I would hop on and show you how it works. A couple housekeeping caveat things. You may hear my cats, who are manic over this salmon. They're going a little crazy over it. So if you hear meowing in the background, that's why. The other thing is if you hear gurgling, it's because my rice cooker is actually going on the counter behind this. I don't know if you guys saw the post about like the most magical thing in my kitchen, my Zojirushi rice cooker, but it's actually cooking rice behind the camera. And so if you hear gurgling, that's what that is. It makes like this Darth Vader kind of sound, which is kind of funny. So I'm gonna get started. We've got 2 pieces of salmon right here. These are from my friend Hank Shaw, who fished them himself. They're wild caught salmon from somewhere amazing, probably Alaska, knowing Hank. And I've got 2 pieces of parchment, and they're rolled up like this because parchment comes in a roll. And it's really annoying to work with. So what I do is I usually fold it against the roll to straighten it out a little bit, fold it in 4 directions. And it does a little bit better staying flat like that. So you'll notice it was rolling this way and I folded it backwards. I've got a pan here. It's just a little 1/4 sheet pan. These things are actually super handy. You can buy these at restaurant supply stores. You can buy them on Amazon. You can buy them at any cooking store. This guy is probably about 14 inches by about 8 inches, and this will fit perfectly 2 portions of fish. So I'm gonna make 1 portion for you. And then I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. The oven is going at about 375 right now. A lot of people recommend cooking fish in parchment at 400. I don't like that. I take it down a little lower. It gives you a little bit more wiggle room for time, because the goal of fish in parchment is supposed to be like flaky and moist, and the higher you take the temperature, the less time it cooks, the more opportunity you have to overcook it. So I like to cook a little bit slower. And for fish, there's no connective tissue that's really breaking down, so cooking it a little slower isn't going to be a problem. So we're going to take a piece of parchment, which, since we folded it in 4 to counteract the rolling activity, it's already folded in half. I'm going to take 1 little piece of salmon here, and I'm going to set it right here and dry my hands off. And then I'm going to take a fairly generous amount of salt and sprinkle it over the top. I like to sprinkle it from higher up so you get a more even dusting of salt. If you sprinkle it from down here, you only drop it in like little spots, which isn't great. You want to sprinkle from higher up. I'm sprinkling probably a little over a 1/4 teaspoon. Then we're going to use the lemon. Now, I do not want anybody to give me shit about using the little plastic squirt lemon, okay? Like, we are not dogmatic here. Like, I don't have any lemons in the house. I'm not going to the freaking store just for a lemon, so I keep this little guy in the fridge because it's handy. And it doesn't ever expire. It lasts like 2 years. So we're going to use the squirt lemon. And I don't want to hear a single word about it. So we're going to give this guy a good squirt of lemon juice, because fish loves lemon. And then I'm going to take a little dab of butter. I'd say probably a teaspoon. You can go less if you want, or you can use olive oil if you're trying to go a little bit healthier. You don't generally want to use too much fat on it though, because it can make the fish really fatty, especially if you're cooking with salmon, which is already kind of a fatty fish. Notice I just dropped it right in the middle there. And then I've got some sage here that I pulled out of my garden. And so I'm going to chop these leaves really quickly. I'm just going to roll them up like a cigar, and then I'm going to chop them into little ribbons. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw them on top of the fish. And it's going to look really nice too, because this sage will actually like fry a little bit in the butter and the heat of the fat of the salmon, and it'll give it kind of a like a fried sage taste. It's really delicious. So we're going to take this. We're going to just drop it on top of the fish, separate them out a little bit. Come back here, guys. Also, they look nice. It just adds like a nice green color to it. There we go. You can use as much or as little as you want. You can use any herbs you want. You can use fresh thyme, which is incredible on fish. You can use oregano. You can use any fresh herbs you happen to have in the cupboard or the fridge. One thing I'd be careful of is using rosemary. While rosemary goes really well with fish, the rosemary needles don't cook down as much, and so they still stay kind of hard, and when you eat them, they can like stab you in the gums, like, ah, and it's really no bueno. So we've got our salt. got our lemon, we've got our butter, we've got our herbs, and of course we've got our fish. Now what we're gonna do is we're going to take the edges of this parchment and we're just gonna fold them up like this. So I like doing 2 folds on either side. And then I actually cheat because parchment is a total pain in the butt sometimes and it just likes to be a jerk and fight you. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to staple it, which many people will be like, oh God, she's stapling her parchment, whatever. I don't care. Like my only goal is that it doesn't come undone in the oven, right? So now I've got it folded 2 folds on each side, and then I'm gonna fold in the corners to round them a little bit, like that. And then I have my little, actually have a little kitchen stapler for this. It's like a little tiny guy that I only use in the kitchen. And then really you only need to staple the corners. Although if you have like a corner, another edge that's particularly uncooperative, you can staple that too. I'm gonna staple that. Actually, yeah, I'm gonna staple the corner and the back too, just to make sure it stays closed. So what we wanna do is the envelope is creating kind of like a steam chamber, right? So what's going to happen is this fish is going to cook in the heat. It's going to baste in its own fat and baste in the butter, baste in the herb juices that I've added that mix in with the butter and kind of are carried by the oil. And the steam, what the steam's going to do is it's going to keep the salmon nice and moist. Now, this is where it's important to say that you can still overcook fish in parchment. And I've done it. In fact, I did it recently. My phone rang and I got distracted. And I don't know if I didn't set the timer or I like absentmindedly turned it off. And the fish just cooked for like an extra like 3 or 4 minutes and it was too dry. And it was really sad because it was beautiful fish. So just because it's in parchment doesn't mean that you can just like walk away and forget about it. Like this is not 100% bulletproof, but cooking it in steam will give you a little bit more wiggle room. It is less likely to overcook, but that doesn't mean you can walk away and forget about it. Now see what we've got here is our perfect little envelope. Isn't that great? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the other one. I'll do it off camera because I don't think you guys want to sit here and just stare at me while I wrap fish all day. But what I'm going to do before I put these in the oven, because the oven is preheated, I'm going to put them in the fridge for a few minutes because I think you've heard me mention in the past that you want to salt fish or you want to salt meat ahead of time. So if you're cooking with like meat or red meat or chicken, you want to do it like 12 to 24 hours ahead of time. You don't want to do that with fish. Fish is really delicate, even salmon. And if you salt it that far ahead of time, it can make it kind of like, I don't know, mealy. Give it a weird, it kind of breaks down the proteins and the texture of the protein doesn't work very well if you salt it too far ahead of time, but ironically they're saltwater fish, right? But what you basically want to do is, I've salted this. I still wanted to salt it ahead of time, right? And I'm using air quotes because it's a much shorter ahead of time period, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the fridge for like 10-15 minutes. Fish does not like to sit out at room temperature, so I don't want to let it sit out on the counter for too long. I also don't want to let it sit in the fridge for too long because I also don't want to chill it when I'm about to throw it in the oven. But 10 to 15 minutes in the fridge will be fine. It won't chill it that much. What it will do is it will allow the salt to soak into the meat to kind of season it throughout. So every time you take a bite of fish, it will be salty throughout the entire fish and not just on the surface. So that's really important. Like I said, it's fish, but it's really delicate. You don't want to salt it too far ahead of time, like literally 20 minutes max. Otherwise you start compromising the texture of your fish. But 10 to 15 minutes is about perfect. So salt it, and then, add all your ingredients, add your lemon, add your butter, add your herbs. You want to roll up the corners, staple it, put it in the fridge for 10 to 15 minutes so that the salt really soaks in the fish, and then throw it in the oven. Now, these are sort of single person portions of salmon. I'm going to give these at 375, I'm going to give them 10 minutes because they're not huge pieces of salmon. But the thing is, like, even a big piece of salmon, if you were to cook these much longer than 10 to 12 minutes, like, you would really risk drying them out, even at 375. So the thing about fish is it's better to undercook fish than overcook fish because overcooked fish is like dry, it's like you get stuck in your teeth, and it like basically you subtract all of its joy, right? Like all the goodness of the fish is gone. It doesn't even taste like salmon anymore because it just tastes like dry stuff, dry protein. So we're going to take these for 10, 11, 12 minutes max. And I'm going to like it's hard to gauge because they're in parchment, but like I'm going to use my intuition. When I pull it out, I can see how much they're steaming. Trial and error will tell you exactly how long it takes to cook your average piece of fish. And then what happens when you take it out of the oven is it actually carryover cooks for like another 2 to 3 to 4 minutes, depending on the size of the piece of fish, right? So if it's almost cooked, and then I take it out of the oven and I let it sit there for minutes while I do my brown rice or I do my salad or I do something else. Like, you don't want to let it sit too long. You want to time it so that the fish is done about the same time as everything else in your meal is done. But you're going to let it sit for like just a few minutes. And in that time, it's going to finish cooking the rest of the way from the internal heat. The internal heat is going to finish cooking, kind of spreading throughout the entire piece of fish. And it will be perfect when it's done. So I'm going to throw this guy in the fridge. And I think that's it. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them below this video and I will get them answered. I'm going to throw this video in the units portion of the group here so that anybody can find it. So if you ever want to find it in the future, just go into the units portion of the group and look for video trainings and it'll be in there. So that's it. I'm going to go make my other piece of fish and I hope you guys have a good dinner.